The November rain fell cold and heavy, mirroring the despair settling in my chest. Outside the house Thomas and I built, my life was being tossed onto the lawn, piece by piece. Daniel, Thomas's brother, stood in the doorway, a cruel satisfaction twisting his features as he threw out boxes filled with our shared history. It had only been 17 days since I buried Thomas, and the raw wound of his absence felt ripped open again by this brutal act. "Get out. Now!" Daniel's voice boomed, harsh and final. He picked up a small wooden box holding precious photos, the only physical link to so many happy moments, and flung it onto the wet driveway. It splintered on impact. "You don't belong here anymore." I knelt in the mud of what was once my flower bed, the cold seeping into my clothes, trying to salvage what I could from the growing piles. My hands shook uncontrollably. "Please, Daniel," I pleaded, the rain mixing with tears on my face. "This is my home. Thomas and I built this together, with our own hands, our own dreams." Lauren, Daniel's wife, emerged, her expression a mask of disdain. She hugged herself against the chill, her eyes sharp and unforgiving. "Your home?" she scoffed, a sound like breaking glass. "Don't be ridiculous. This land has always been Harper family property. You were just a parasite, marrying Thomas for money, thinking you'd inherit everything. Now that he's gone, you're worthless." The curtains in the surrounding houses twitched. Faces appeared in windows, drawn by the commotion. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed. Others stared with a morbid curiosity that made my skin crawl. They saw my humiliation, but no one stepped forward, no one spoke up. "Let them all see." Lauren's voice rose, ensuring her words carried across the street. "This is what happens to women who prey on good men. She thought she was set for life, but the free ride is over." Their words were designed to inflict maximum pain, to strip away my dignity in front of everyone. For 5 years, Thomas and I had shared a love that made our simple life feel rich. We weren't wealthy, but we had built a home filled with laughter, quiet evenings, and the comfort of being truly seen and loved. That house held the echo of our promises, the scent of my baking, the sound of his guitar. It was the foundation of our world. "I have rights here," I managed, pushing myself up, trying to stand tall despite the tremor in my legs. Thomas wanted me to stay. This was our future. "Thomas is gone," Daniel repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. He held up a stack of papers. "And this land wasn't solely in his name. Never mind yours. It remained family property. I have the legal documents confirming it." A man in a dark suit stood silently beside him, his presence lending an air of cold, official authority to their actions. "You have 10 minutes, Daniel said, glancing at his watch with exaggerated impatience. "Gather your things and leave. If you're still here, I'll call the sheriff for trespassing." My eyes searched the watching faces, landing on Martha Edwards, our elderly neighbor, who had shared countless cups of tea and stories with Thomas and me. She had seen us build, had celebrated our small victories, had offered comfort during our deepest sorrow. "Martha, please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Tell them. You know what our life was like here. You know this was our home." She lowered her gaze, unable to meet my eyes. Her silence was a physical blow, a quiet confirmation of my isolation. Fear, I knew, kept her from speaking, but it didn't lessen the sting of feeling abandoned. With a heavy heart, I began grabbing the few things I could carry: photo albums, a small box of Thomas's cherished belongings, a few changes of clothes. The furniture we'd refinished together, the quilts I'd sewn, the kitchen table where we shared every meal, the vibrant garden I'd nurtured, all were left behind, claimed by their callous greed. "Time's running out," Lauren called out, tapping her foot impatiently on the wet pavement. "Move it." As I struggled to load the meager collection into my old Chevrolet, Parked haphazardly at the curb, I heard Lauren's loud whispers. I always knew she was after his money. Thomas told us how much she spent, never lifted a finger to help build anything. Lies, designed to justify their cruelty to the watching neighbors. But standing there, exposed and heartbroken, the words choked me. I had no strength left to defend myself. With the car packed, a messy pile of my displaced life, I turned to face Daniel one last time. He looked triumphant. "This isn't right," I said, my voice low but steady, a strange calm settling over the storm inside me. "You can't just take someone's home like this." Daniel stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Thomas is gone," he sneered. "And you were nothing before him. A nobody who thought marrying my brother would make you someone. Now you're going back to the nothingness you came from." The bitterness in his eyes spoke of a long-held resentment, a deep-seated contempt he had waited years to unleash. Lauren approached, holding something familiar, my wedding album. My breath hitched. "You forgot this," she said with mock sweetness, her eyes glinting. Before I could reach for it, she deliberately let it fall into a large puddle of muddy water. It landed with a sickening splash. Oh dear. How clumsy. The photos instantly soaked, the ink bleeding. I gasped, bending down, but Daniel's foot came down hard on the album, grinding it into the mud, crushing the wet pages. "Time's up," he announced, a wide, cruel smile on his face. "Get off my property." Numb, heartbroken, but refusing to crumble completely, I got into the car. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. The old engine sputtered to life, and I drove away slowly, watching in the rearview mirror as Daniel was already changing the locks on the front door of the house that had been our sanctuary. Lauren stood beside him, a smug look on her face. I drove until the tears blurred the road, pulling over into the empty parking lot of a closed store. Leaning my head on the steering wheel, I finally let the sobs rack my body. The crushing reality hit me. I was homeless, alone, with nothing but a beat-up car and a few boxes of salvaged memories. My home was gone. My husband was gone. Everything was gone. Night descended, wrapping the city in a cold, indifferent blanket. My Chevrolet, never meant for sleeping, became my prison. The seats were hard, the space cramped, and sleep was a cruel stranger. 3 days had passed since the eviction, and the car was my entire world. Days were spent driving aimlessly, trying to look like I had somewhere to be. Nights parked in quiet, anonymous spots, hoping to disappear until morning. Every distant sound, every passing car, tightened the knot of fear in my stomach. I felt utterly exposed, vulnerable to the world. I took out the small, wrinkled photo of Thomas I kept in my pocket. The dim glow of a distant streetlight illuminated his face, the gentle curve of his smile. That smile could chase away any shadow, make any burden feel lighter. He always knew how to find the good, how to make me laugh even when things were tough. "Remember when we found it, my love?" I whispered to his picture, my voice raspy from disuse and unshed tears. It felt like a lifetime ago. That day he drove me out of the city, a secret twinkle in his eyes. He had blindfolded me, leading me by the hand through what felt like overgrown wilderness. "Okay, you can look now," he'd said, his voice full of anticipation. When he removed the blindfold, I saw it, a neglected, weed-choked piece of land, forgotten and wild. "It's an abandoned lot?" I'd asked, confused, my heart sinking slightly. He'd laughed, a warm, wonderful sound, and pulled me into a hug. "No, my darling," he'd whispered against my hair. "It's our future. My parents gave me this land years ago, an early inheritance. It's been waiting for us. We'll build our sanctuary here, our home, just for us." His words transformed the view. The weeds became potential. The forgotten corner of the world became our blank canvas. Our own home? From the ground up? I'd asked, wonder blossoming in my chest. Foundation by foundation, he'd confirmed, holding my hands, his eyes shining with excitement. With our effort, our sweat, and our love, every single piece will be ours, built by us, for us. And so, the adventure began. We both worked full-time jobs, but every weekend, every vacation day, every spare hour was dedicated to the land. Thomas drew up simple plans, and I started sketching ideas for the garden, dreaming of flowers and vegetables. Clearing the land was backbreaking work, pulling stubborn roots, hauling away debris, but there was a deep satisfaction in transforming the neglected earth. "Look at my hands," I joked one evening, showing him palms calloused and scratched, a far cry from the soft hands I used for arranging flowers at my part-time job back then. "They're building our tomorrow, Olivia," he'd said, gently kissing my palms. "They're building our life." Thomas's parents visited often, bringing food, encouragement, and sometimes just sitting with us in the dirt, sharing stories. They welcomed me into their family with open arms, treating me like the daughter they never had. Daniel and Lauren were a different story. Their visits were infrequent and always tinged with criticism. "Why are you doing all this yourselves? It's so inefficient," Daniel would say, looking around with thinly veiled disapproval. "You could hire professionals and be done in months, not years." "We prefer to do it ourselves," Thomas would reply calmly, though I could see the frustration in his eyes. "Every beam, every nail, tells our story. It's a labor of love, Daniel. Something you wouldn't understand." They saw property, an asset. We saw a home, the physical manifestation of our shared dreams and commitment. 2 years passed this way, filled with hard work, small triumphs, and the quiet joy of building something together. Years blended into a rhythm of building. The house slowly took shape, brick by brick, board by board. It was a simple structure, modest in size, but every corner held the imprint of our hands, our sweat, and our laughter. We learned plumbing from books, electrical wiring from online tutorials, and carpentry through trial and error. There were frustrating days, moments of doubt, but we faced them together, a team. My garden flourished, a vibrant counterpoint to the still unfinished house. I turned the rocky soil into rich, dark earth, planting roses, lavender, tomatoes, and herbs. It was my sanctuary within the sanctuary we were creating. The feel of the soil, the scent of the flowers, grounded me. Martha Edwards, our kind neighbor, became a regular visitor. She'd bring over lemonade on hot days, share gardening tips passed down through generations, and listen patiently as we talked about our plans. She saw the love and dedication we were pouring into the place and became like a second mother to me. A warm, comforting presence amidst the hard work. Daniel and Lauren's rare visits continued to be strained. They never offered help, only unsolicited advice and veiled criticisms about our slow progress or our choices. They couldn't comprehend the value we placed on the process, on the act of building our dream with our own hands. They saw only the potential monetary value, the finished product. We faced setbacks. One harsh winter, before the insulation was fully in, the pipes froze and burst. A summer thunderstorm with torrential rain found a weak spot in the roof, causing a leak that ruined some drywall we'd just hung. But the hardest challenge, the one that shook us to our core, was the miscarriage. We lost our baby early in the pregnancy. The joy of building our future felt stolen, replaced by an unbearable ache. We held each other in the half-finished living room, sitting on the bare floor, the silence of the house amplifying our grief. "We'll get through this, Liv," Thomas whispered, his voice thick with tears, holding me tighter than ever before. "This house, it will be full of life again. Our life." We'll fill it with so much love, so much joy, that this pain won't have room to stay. That shared sorrow, that deep, profound loss, cemented our bond and made the house even more precious. It became our sanctuary, a place where we could heal together. We poured our energy into finishing it, filling it not just with furniture and paint, but with music playing on a small radio. The comforting smell of my baking bread, the fresh scent of flowers from my growing garden. It wasn't just walls and a roof. It was the container of our shared history, our hopes, our pain, and our enduring love. We hosted small, intimate gatherings, barbecues in the backyard with Thomas's parents and Martha, quiet evenings by the fireplace we'd built ourselves. Martha was always welcome, a true part of our extended, chosen family. Just over 4 years after we first stood on that overgrown lot, the house was finally finished. It was simple, cozy, filled with natural light, and felt like it breathed with us. We had a small blessing ceremony with Thomas's parents and Martha, celebrating not just the house, but the life we had built within its walls. Daniel and Lauren declined the invitation, citing other commitments. We weren't surprised, just a little sad they couldn't share in our quiet joy. Then, just a few months after we were truly settled, Thomas got sick. It was sudden, aggressive. Cancer. The diagnosis shattered our world. We spent months fighting, traveling to appointments, clinging to hope, praying for a miracle. He was so incredibly brave, facing it all with a quiet strength that amazed me. He passed away in the spring, just a few weeks before Daniel and Lauren brutally kicked me out. The house, our sanctuary, the place we built with so much love and hope, became first a place of unbearable grief, and then, in a cruel twist of fate, was violently taken from me. Living in the car after that felt like the final, most crushing blow. The cold, the constant discomfort, the gnawing fear of being seen, of being utterly alone and vulnerable. It was a million miles away from the warmth, safety, and love of the home we had built with our own hands and hearts. I felt lost, invisible, like I had ceased to exist, just a ghost haunting the streets in a beat-up car. Days blurred into a week, then 2, stretching towards 3. My life was reduced to survival, cheap food from gas stations, crackers, sometimes a bruised apple, endless cups of coffee to keep warm. I used public restrooms whenever I could find clean ones, splashing water on my face in the sink, trying to maintain some semblance of hygiene and dignity. It was humiliating, a constant reminder of how far I had fallen. I moved my car every night, seeking different parking spots, quiet residential streets during the day where I could blend in, well-lit lots near large stores at night, where the presence of other cars offered a fragile sense of safety. Shame was a constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't shed. I felt like a failure, utterly defeated. The ache of missing Thomas was a physical pain, a hollow space in my chest where his presence used to be. Every night, I talked to his picture, pouring out my despair, telling him how lost I was, how unfair this was, how I didn't know how to go on without him, without our home. One cold, gray morning, hungry and directionless, I found myself walking near a small, charming downtown area. I was just trying to put one foot in front of the other, trying to figure out how to survive the day. I passed a small shop with a bright, cheerful sign, Anna's Flowers and Coffee. The windows were filled with vibrant blooms, a splash of color against the drab November day. The air around the shop smelled wonderful, a mix of fresh coffee and blooming flowers. It felt like a tiny oasis of beauty in my bleak world. I paused, gazing at the display, a sharp pang of longing for my own lost garden twisting in my gut. A woman with kind eyes and a warm, genuine smile emerged from the shop, carrying a small chalkboard sign. She had flour dusting her apron and looked busy but content. She noticed me standing there, lingering by the window. "Good morning," she said gently, her voice soft and welcoming. "Beautiful day, isn't it? A bit chilly, but the sun's trying to peek through." I just nodded, my throat tight. My voice felt rusty, unused. I pulled my thin jacket tighter. "Looking for anything in particular?" she asked, not pushy, just curious and open. "Or maybe just warming up. We have fresh coffee inside." "Just looking," I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. The shame of not being able to afford even a cup of coffee was a heavy weight. She looked at me for a moment, her kind eyes taking me in without judgment. She saw something, felt something. "You know," she said, gesturing back towards the shop with her chalky hand. "We could use a little help around here. It gets quite busy, especially with the holidays coming up. Arranging flowers, helping customers, keeping the place tidy, maybe helping out in the little kitchen area. It's not full-time, not glamorous work, but it's honest work. Pays a little something. Interested?" My heart gave a sudden, unexpected leap. Work. A way to earn money, to feel useful again, to have a purpose beyond mere survival. "Yes," I said quickly, the words stronger this time, filled with a desperate hope. "Yes, I am very interested." That was how I met Anna Taylor. She gave me a chance when I had nothing, when the world had turned its back on me. She didn't ask probing questions at first, just handed me an apron and showed me where the broom was. I started with simple tasks, sweeping floors, cleaning tables, watering the plants. My hands, calloused from building and gardening, seemed to remember the feel of the leaves, the connection to living things. Soon, Anna was showing me how to arrange flowers, how to choose colors and textures, and I found a quiet joy in the work, an echo of the pleasure I'd found in my own garden with Thomas. Anna was patient, kind, and incredibly generous. At the end of each day, she paid me fairly, and often she would discreetly pack up extra food for me to take with me, a warm sandwich, a fresh muffin, a cup of soup. She was like an angel, appearing when I was at my lowest point, offering a lifeline. Working at Anna's gave me a fragile sense of stability, a reason to get out of the car each morning, a place to be during the day where I wasn't just hiding. It wasn't a home, not in the way the house with Thomas was, but it was a start. It gave me back a little piece of my shattered dignity. As I slowly began to find my footing, the crushing weight of grief was still there, a constant ache. But beneath it, a new feeling began to stir. Anger. What Daniel and Lauren did wasn't just cruel. It was wrong. It felt illegal. Thomas would never have wanted this. He loved that house, and he loved me in it. The thought took root. Maybe I did have rights. Maybe those papers Daniel waved weren't the whole story. Maybe there was something I could do, some way to fight back against the injustice. I finally found the courage to tell Anna a little bit about what had happened, about losing Thomas, about his brother kicking me out of the house we built together. "Oh, Olivia, honey, that's just horrific," she said, her face filled with genuine sympathy. "And you absolutely cannot let them get away with that. It's not right. Not right at all. You need to talk to someone who understands the law, a lawyer." She gave me the name of a lawyer she knew, Ryan Green. She said he was a good man, honest, and had helped people who were struggling, people who didn't have a lot of resources. Calling his office was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. My hand shook as I dialed the number, and my voice trembled as I explained my situation to the receptionist, the words catching in my throat. But the receptionist was kind, patient. They scheduled a meeting for me. Walking into Ryan Green's office felt like stepping into a different world. It was quiet, calm, ordered, the complete opposite of the chaos my life had become. Ryan was younger than I expected, maybe in his late 30s, with a serious, thoughtful face and kind eyes. He motioned for me to sit down. I sat across from him, feeling small and overwhelmed, and for the first time, I told the entire, messy, painful story from the beginning. Meeting Thomas, finding the land, building the house with our hands, the years of hard work and love, the good times, the bad times, Thomas getting sick, his passing, Daniel and Lauren's brutal eviction, the humiliation of living in my car, everything. I showed him the few documents I had managed to save, the ruined wedding photos, a heartbreaking testament to their cruelty. He listened without interruption, his expression steady, taking careful notes. He didn't judge me, didn't make me feel like a charity case. When I finished, my voice hoarse and my eyes stinging from the effort of holding back tears, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. This is a complex situation, Olivia, he said, his voice calm and considered. Especially with the property deed not being solely in Thomas's name, or yours. But based on everything you've told me, the length of your marriage, your significant contribution to building and maintaining the property, the circumstances of your removal, yes, I believe you have grounds for a case. There are laws concerning marital assets, contributions to property value even if your name isn't on the deed, and the way you were forcibly removed, without any legal process, that raises very serious questions about their actions. He looked again at the papers I had given him. I'll need to do a lot of research, dig into the history of that property, examine the county records, understand the exact structure of ownership, see if there's anything in Thomas's parents' will about the land, or any other agreements. And we need to scrutinize the documents Daniel showed you, see if they're legitimate, if they tell the whole story, or if something was misrepresented. He explained that it wouldn't be easy. It would take time. It would likely be expensive, though he quickly added that they could discuss payment arrangements later, which lifted a small weight from my shoulders. And it would be a fight. Daniel and Lauren wouldn't back down easily. But for the first time since Thomas died, since I was thrown out into the rain, a tiny, fragile spark of hope ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to stay broken and defeated. Maybe I could fight back. Ryan Green looked at me, his expression firm and kind, and said, "I'll take your case, Olivia. Let's see what we can do." The fight for what was right, for Thomas's memory, for the home we built with love, was about to begin. Ryan Green's office became my sanctuary, a quiet harbor in the storm of my life. He worked tirelessly, a calm, steady presence against the chaos Daniel and Lauren had unleashed. Days turned into weeks, filled with meetings where I recounted painful memories, signed papers I barely understood, and tried to piece together the fragments of my life with Thomas. Ryan delved into the history of the property, navigating complex legal documents that seemed designed to confuse. He requested records from the county, examined Thomas's parents' will, and meticulously reviewed the papers Daniel had brandished that rainy November day. The process was slow, frustrating, and emotionally draining. Each question Ryan asked, each document he uncovered, brought back a flood of memories, happy ones, now tinged with the sharp ache of loss, and painful ones, highlighting the depth of Daniel and Lauren's betrayal. I spent hours at Anna's shop, finding solace in the simple rhythm of arranging flowers, the earthy scent grounding me. Anna never pushed, just offered quiet support, a warm meal, a safe place to exist for a few hours each day. She was a constant reminder that kindness still existed in the world. One afternoon, Ryan called me into his office, his expression serious. "Olivia," he began, spreading several documents across his desk. "I've found some inconsistencies. The property deed, while initially in Thomas's parents' names, was partially transferred to Thomas years ago. Not the entire plot, but a significant portion, specifically the part where your house stands. It seems Daniel overlooked that detail." My breath hitched. "So, It wasn't just family property? Not entirely, Ryan confirmed. Thomas owned a percentage, and as his wife, you have a claim to his share, especially considering your joint effort in building the house. Furthermore, I suspect the documents Daniel showed you might have been misleading, perhaps even altered, or at least presented in a way to make you believe you had no rights. He paused, his eyes meeting mine. I also found evidence of suspicious financial activity around the time of Thomas's death, and immediately after. Large withdrawals from accounts Thomas held, transfers. Some of it points to Daniel. A cold knot formed in my stomach. They hadn't just stolen my home. They had potentially stolen from Thomas's estate, from the life we built. They took everything, I whispered, the words heavy with pain. They tried to, Ryan corrected, his voice firm. But they didn't count on you fighting back, or on the truth having a way of coming out. He leaned forward. Based on what I've found, we have strong grounds to contest the eviction. We can argue illegal trespass, destruction of property, your belongings, and make a claim for your share of the marital assets, including the value you added to the property through your work building the house and cultivating the land. We'll also raise the issue of the suspicious financial transactions. I believe Daniel acted under the assumption you knew nothing, that you were too broken by grief to fight. He was wrong. He outlined the legal strategy. We would file a lawsuit against Daniel and Lauren, demanding the return of my rightful share of the property and compensation for the damages and emotional distress they caused. It would mean going to court, facing them, reliving the most painful moments of my life. Fear, sharp and visceral, clenched my chest. Could I do it? Could I stand before them, the people who had stripped me bare, and demand justice? Ryan seemed to sense my hesitation. I will be difficult, Olivia, he said gently. But you are not alone. We will face them together. You have the truth on your side, and you have the law. And you have a powerful story of love, loss, and resilience. That is stronger than any lie they can tell. His words were a lifeline. I thought of Thomas, of his unwavering belief in me, of the home we built with so much love. I thought of Anna, her quiet strength and kindness. I thought of Martha Edwards, her pained silence that day. This wasn't just about getting a house back. It was about honoring Thomas's memory, about reclaiming my dignity, about showing Daniel and Lauren that their cruelty would not go unpunished. I'll do it, I said, my voice gaining strength. I'll fight. The legal battle began. Papers were filed, subpoenas issued. The air grew thick with anticipation, the quiet tension before a storm. I knew the path ahead would be fraught with pain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of purpose, a reason to stand tall. The fight for justice, for Thomas's legacy, had officially begun. The courtroom was a sterile, imposing space. High ceilings, dark wood, the air thick with formality and unspoken tension. Facing Daniel and Lauren across the aisle, seeing their smug, confident faces, sent a jolt of cold fear through me. But Ryan Green was by my side, a steady anchor, his presence a quiet reassurance. The initial days of the trial were a blur of legal jargon, procedural arguments, and the dry presentation of evidence. Ryan laid out our case, detailing the history of the property, the years Thomas and I spent building our home, the abrupt and brutal eviction. He presented the documents showing Thomas's partial ownership, highlighting the discrepancies in Daniel's claims. Then came the testimonies. Neighbors were called, some offering hesitant accounts of seeing us work on the house, others recalling the day of the eviction with uncomfortable vagueness. The air in the room was heavy with unspoken truths and the pressure of choosing sides. Finally, Martha Edwards was called to the stand. My heart ached for her. She looked frail, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes avoiding mine. She spoke softly, confirming she had been our neighbor for years, had seen us building the house, had witnessed the eviction. But when Daniel's lawyer questioned her about the property ownership, about whether she had ever heard Thomas mention the land belonging solely to the Harper family, she hesitated. Her voice trembled as she gave vague answers, seemingly confirming Daniel's narrative, just as she had done with her silence that day. My stomach plummeted. It was happening again. Fear was keeping her from speaking the truth. I saw Daniel and Lauren exchange a look of triumph. Ryan Green approached Martha calmly during his cross-examination. "Mrs. Edwards," he said gently, "do you recall speaking with me and my assistant a few weeks ago?" She nodded, her eyes still downcast. "And do you recall telling us about a visit Daniel and Lauren made to your home shortly after the eviction?" Martha's hands tightened further. She mumbled something inaudible. "Please speak up, Mrs. Edwards," the judge prompted, his voice firm but not unkind. Martha took a shaky breath. "Yes," she whispered. "They came to see me." Ryan's voice remained calm. "And what did they say to you, Mrs. Edwards?" She was silent for a long moment, the tension in the courtroom palpable. I watched her, praying she would find the strength. I saw the conflict on her face, the battle between fear and conscience. Then, slowly, she raised her head and looked directly at the judge, her voice gaining a fragile strength. They told me what to say," she confessed, the words hanging in the air. They said if anyone asked about the house, about Olivia, I should say I didn't know much, that the land was always family land. They said they would make things difficult for me if I spoke against them. They even offered me money, a little bit, to need help with my expenses, if I just kept quiet or said what they wanted. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Daniel and Lauren's faces, moments before smug, turned ashen. Ryan Green's voice was clear and steady. "So, the testimony you gave moments ago about the property being solely family land, was that the truth, or what Daniel and Lauren pressured you to say?" Martha looked at me then, her eyes filled with regret and a newfound resolve. "It wasn't the whole truth," she said, her voice stronger now. "The truth is, Thomas and Olivia built that house with their own hands. They poured their lives into it. Thomas told me himself, years ago, that part of the land was his, given to him by his parents. He was so proud to be building his home there with Olivia. They were a family. That house was their home." Tears streamed down her face. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But I can't live with the lie anymore. What they did, throwing Olivia out like that, it was cruel. Thomas would be heartbroken." Ryan Green then presented a signed statement from Martha, given to his office, detailing the pressure and attempted subornation by Daniel and Lauren. It was a powerful turning point. The air in the courtroom shifted. The judge's expression hardened. Daniel and Lauren looked cornered, their carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. Martha's courage, born of guilt and a desire for truth, had pierced through their lies. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, I felt a surge of hope that justice might actually be possible. The atmosphere in the courtroom crackled after Martha's testimony. The judge had issued a stern warning to Daniel and Lauren regarding witness tampering. Daniel's lawyer tried damage control, painting Martha as confused and elderly, but her sincere distress and the detailed statement she provided were difficult to dismiss. Ryan Green seized the momentum. He began presenting financial records, meticulously tracing transactions around the time of Thomas's death. He showed large sums withdrawn from joint accounts Thomas and I held, funds that seemed to disappear into accounts linked to Daniel. He presented evidence of assets Thomas owned, small investments, a life insurance policy that had seemingly vanished from the estate. "Mr. Harper," Ryan's voice was sharp as he addressed Daniel on the stand, Can you explain these withdrawals? These transfers? Funds that rightfully belong to Mrs. Harper as Thomas's widow? Daniel stammered, offering convoluted explanations about settling debts, covering funeral costs, which I knew were already paid. Vague claims about prior arrangements with Thomas. He sweated under the relentless questioning, his earlier arrogance replaced by nervous evasion. Just as Daniel seemed to be crumbling under the pressure, a new figure entered the courtroom, a representative from the district attorney's office. The prosecutor addressed the judge, requesting permission to present information relevant to the case. "Your Honor," the prosecutor stated, his voice grave. The district attorney's office has been conducting a parallel investigation into potential financial fraud and misrepresentation of property ownership related to the estate of Thomas Harper. Based on evidence gathered, including information recently provided by Mr. Green's office and witness testimony, we believe there is sufficient cause to pursue criminal charges. A wave of shock went through the courtroom. Criminal charges? This was bigger than just a civil dispute over property. The prosecutor continued, detailing how they suspected Daniel had not only misled me about the property deed, but had potentially forged documents or manipulated records to gain control of assets that were rightfully mine through Thomas's estate. The financial transactions Ryan had highlighted were central to their investigation. Daniel looked utterly panicked, his face pale. Lauren, sitting beside him, looked equally terrified, her eyes wide. Then, something unexpected happened. As the prosecutor laid out the potential criminal case, Lauren began to tremble. She looked at Daniel, then at me, then at the floor. The smug mask she usually wore was gone, replaced by raw fear and something that looked disturbingly like guilt. Her lawyer tried to silence her, but she shook him off. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Stop!" she cried out, her voice high-pitched and trembling. "Stop it! I can't do this anymore!" All eyes turned to her. Daniel stared at her, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. "Lauren, sit down," her lawyer hissed, grabbing her arm. She pulled away from him, tears streaming down her face. "No, it's not fair to Olivia. It's not fair to Thomas." She took a shaky breath, her gaze fixing on the judge. "He did it," she sobbed, pointing a trembling finger at Daniel. "Daniel did it. He planned it all. He knew part of the land was Thomas's. He found the old deed papers years ago, before Thomas got sick, and he hid them. He was waiting." She continued, her confession tumbling out in a torrent of guilt and fear. He said Thomas didn't deserve it, that it should all be his because he was the responsible son. He said Thomas wasted his money building that a shack with Olivia instead of investing it. When Thomas got sick, Daniel saw his chance. He started moving money, telling me it was managing Thomas's affairs. He told me to lie, to tell people Olivia was a gold digger, that she didn't help build anything. He forged signatures. He changed dates on documents. He said we had to get her out before she found out about the money, about the real deed. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I went along with it," she choked out. "I was scared of him. He said we'd lose everything if I didn't, but throwing her out, seeing her like that, and Martha, I can't live with it anymore." The courtroom was stunned into silence. Daniel sat frozen, his face a picture of utter defeat and rage. His lawyer looked like he might faint. The judge, after a moment of stunned silence, struck his gavel sharply. "Order! Order in the court!" He looked at the prosecutor. "Given this extraordinary development and the potential criminal implications, I am suspending this civil hearing immediately. Mr. Harper, Mrs. Harper, you are not to leave the jurisdiction. The district attorney's office will be in contact." The courtroom erupted into a controlled chaos as the judge left the bench. Ryan Green put a hand on my arm, his face reflecting a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. Daniel and Lauren were surrounded by their lawyers, their faces pale and drawn. Lauren was still sobbing, while Daniel glared, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred directed at her, at me, at the world. The truth, ugly and painful, had finally shattered the lies. The legal battle was paused, but a new, more serious chapter had just begun for Daniel and Lauren. A year had passed since that dramatic day in the courtroom. The wheels of justice, though slow, had turned. Daniel Harper was convicted of multiple counts of fraud, theft, and obstruction of justice. The evidence, bolstered by Lauren's confession and Ryan Green's meticulous work, was overwhelming. He received a significant prison sentence. Lauren Dow, having cooperated with the prosecution after her breakdown, received a lighter sentence, primarily probation and community service, a consequence she seemed to accept with a quiet, broken resignation. The civil case was settled swiftly after the criminal conviction. With Daniel incarcerated and Lauren facing the consequences of her actions, there was no fight left in them. I recovered the full amount of Thomas's life insurance policy, which Daniel had attempted to siphon away, along with a substantial compensation for the illegal eviction, the destruction of my belongings, and the emotional distress I had endured. The old house, the one Thomas and I built with our hands and hearts, was legally mine again. But standing outside it months later, the garden overgrown, the windows dark, it felt like a shell of what it once was. The memories were still there, vibrant and painful, but the place itself was tainted by the cruelty that had unfolded within its walls and on its lawn. It no longer felt like our sanctuary. It felt like a monument to what was lost, not a foundation for what could be. With a quiet certainty, I decided not to move back. It was a difficult decision, letting go of the physical space we had poured so much of ourselves into, but it felt like the necessary step to truly move forward. The house held too much grief, too many ghosts of the past. Instead, I used the compensation and the insurance money to buy a small, modest house on the other side of town. It wasn't grand, but it had good bones, lots of natural light, and, most importantly, a neglected backyard that was just waiting for my touch. It was a blank canvas, a place to build something new, something entirely mine, filled with future possibilities rather than past pain. Life began to find a new rhythm. I continued working at Anna's Flowers and Coffee, eventually becoming her manager. The work still brought me a quiet joy, the connection to living things a balm to my soul. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since before Thomas got sick. I set up a small studio space in my new home, and the colors and textures flowed onto the canvas, translating the emotions I couldn't always express in words. And the garden. Oh, the garden. I poured my heart and soul into the new backyard. I cleared the weeds, amended the soil, planned beds filled with vibrant flowers and herbs. The physical labor was therapeutic, a way to connect with the earth and nurture new life. Watching things grow, seeing the colors bloom, was a constant reminder of resilience, of the ability of life to return after winter. Every evening, I would sit on the small porch I built myself, a cup of tea in hand, and talk to Thomas. I'd tell him about my day, about the progress in the garden, about a funny thing Anna said. It was a quiet ritual, a way to keep his memory alive, not with sadness, but with love and shared moments, even if they were just in my heart. My relationship with Anna deepened into a true friendship. She was family now, a confidant and a source of unwavering support. Ryan Green became more than just my lawyer. He was a friend who had fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. We'd meet for coffee sometimes, talking about everything but the case, just two people who had been through a difficult journey together. A few months ago, I took a trip to the coast, a place Thomas and I had always dreamed of visiting. I carried a small, carved wooden box containing a portion of his ashes. Standing on the windswept beach, the vast ocean stretching before me, I scattered his ashes into the waves. It was a moment of profound sadness, but also of peace. He was free, and in letting him go into the endless sea, I felt a sense of release too. The love remained, a warm, steady current within me, but the sharp edge of grief began to soften. Lately, I've even taken up pottery. The feel of the clay in my hands, shaping something from nothing, is incredibly centering. It's another way to create, to build, to find beauty in the simple act of making. Looking back, the journey from that rainy November day, huddled in my car, broken and alone, seems impossible. Daniel and Lauren tried to erase me, to take everything. They took the house, the money. They tried to steal my dignity and my past, but they failed. They didn't understand that the true home wasn't just the building. It was the love Thomas and I shared, the resilience we built together, the strength I found within myself when I had nothing left to lose. I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. I didn't just get justice. I found peace. The scars are still there, reminders of the pain, but they are also reminders of my strength. My life is different now, quieter in some ways, but richer in others. It is a life built on truth, kindness, and the enduring power of love. If this story of overcoming adversity touched your heart, please leave a like and share it with anyone who needs hope. What did you admire most about my journey? Tell me in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel. Your company is our greatest motivation to keep going and share more stories.